Welcome to the Art and Soul Podcast. I'm Alicia, your fellow dreamer and guide on this path of healing. This podcast is our sanctuary, a place where artists, creatives, and sensitive souls like you and me can come to recharge and find inspiration. You'll find tips and tools to help you on your awakening journey. Let's dive deep and discover the magic inside of us. All right. Welcome to the second week of talking about all of the energy centers. I'm so glad you're here. We are discussing the main 7 energy centers in the body. So if you have not listened to the episode from last week, maybe start with that one and then come back to this one. And the only reason I say that is because it is important to build upon the foundation, especially with our energy, but really with anything in life. You have to have a solid foundation before you can build on top of that and work with the energy on top of that. So it's really important to make sure you have balanced your root energy center before coming to the sacral energy center and working with that. The sacral energy center is all about creativity, intimacy, flow, emotion, pleasure, all things sensual. And when I say sensual, I am talking about the senses, pleasure. The sacral energy center is located just below the belly button in the front of the body, and then on the back of the body, it's right where your sacrum is, which is that bone that is shaped like almost like a triangle at the base of your spine. The sacral chakra in Sanskrit is a word that means dwelling or one's own place. And I'm not really quite sure why they call it that, except that there are many traditions that say that our intuition and our place of all creation within our body lies in the sacral chakra. And when you think about it, it is not only the place of energetic creation, but it also is where the womb is in a woman's body. And to many cultures, and especially a lot of ancient societies and civilizations, that was a really sacred and significant place in the body. And I think maybe we've lost a little bit of that in our modern Western society. But I think people are starting to come back to this sense of how important this space is in the body, especially for women, and this journey of creation and intuition and a woman's intuition, whether that be, on a physical level or more of this energetic and spiritual level as well. So we'll get into a little bit more of that as we go. The sacral chakra is associated with the color orange, and it is also associated with the element of water. Remember, I told you that all of the energy centers are associated with some element. And the reason that we associate it with water is because it symbolizes the flow, the flexibility, the adaptability of this energy center. When you think about emotions, emotions are flowing through your body, they are flowing through your system, they are energy in motion. So all of that acts just like water. The sacral energy center, too, in our culture seems to be very suppressed. The sacral energy center in my own life has been quite a journey. I mean, it just holds so much. There is so much there, and if you haven't processed your emotions fully, or if you are an extremely sensitive or extremely empathetic person, you're absorbing a lot of people's emotions as well, which is a big part of what I was doing. And then on top of that, it's connected with your sexuality and your ability to experience intimacy. It's connected with your creativity and your ability to express your creation into the world, to birth your creation into the world. So there can be a lot of elements and a lot of components for people all wrapped up in here. So let's get down to exactly what all of the elements of the sacral chakra are. The first one is intimacy. And intimacy is not just talking about sexual intimacy or romantic intimacy, but it's also talking about our ability to connect with others. That simply, to connect with others on a deep level, an emotional level, and this can be platonic or romantic. And I've had a lot of clients come to me and want to work through energy related to relationships. They want to work with why they haven't found their partner yet, or they want to work through a divorce they've been through, and those kind of things. And a lot of times what it comes down to is really that relationship with yourself. And so another element of this sacral chakra is that self-worth piece. It is your self-esteem and your sense of deservingness. It's completely tied into how you perceive your own value and then how you express that into the world. A lot of times, if you are struggling in finding a life partner or in your relationships in some way, typically one person or the other is having a hard time with their own personal value. And a lot of times that goes back really far. Sometimes that even goes back multiple generations, that you have not felt worthy, or your parents didn't feel worthy, or their parents didn't feel worthy, and that has been passed on to you. Specifically in this area, for some reason too, in this sacral chakra, it feels like there is a deeper thread of that ancestral or generational energy or trauma that moves through. And part of it may be because this is the womb area. This is the place of creation. And so maybe as the mother, you're holding all of this worthlessness or lack of belief in yourself or low self-esteem, as you're holding all of that and you are creating life, maybe it just is a little bit easier to pass through in that way. I'm not sure. But so a lot of what is found here is generational. And so especially, and this is very common with a lot of people that come see me as clients, if you are struggling with intimate relationships, and again, not just romantic relationships, but maybe you have trouble keeping friendships, or you have a difficult time making friends, or feeling like you are really, truly, deeply connecting with people, you may have some sort of imbalance here in this area, and it might not even be your own. It might be many generations back and something that you've just been carrying. And let's for a minute talk about generational energy, because I think that maybe we hear it a lot in terms of in these healing communities and in terms of our healing, but what is it really? Essentially, generational energy is just emotional energy from one of your ancestors that they were not able to fully process. And so it became trapped and stuck within their own system. And what happens is if they never release that or they never let that go, it builds upon itself. And maybe they had one event in their life that made them feel worthless and just really horrible about themselves, like they didn't deserve any value. And then because they had not processed that emotion of worthlessness, that worthlessness became almost like a radio signal in their body or a resounding bell in their body. And that continuous signal caused more experiences that made them feel worthless. So then it was just their body attracting more experiences to validate that emotion that already existed within them. And then they decided to have children, and they had children. And those children then pick up not only the DNA of their parents, but they also pick up the energetic DNA, and that's passed along. And it is continually passed along until someone decides that they no longer want to carry it. And sometimes it's passed along so long because people don't even realize that they are carrying this burden. Or maybe they realize it, but they don't know where it came from, or they don't know how to release it or how to get rid of it. And so when someone decides finally that they are going to figure out how to heal this or how to get rid of it, no matter where it came from, then finally that generation can be free of that energy that ultimately was just a place of pain, a place of hurt in the first person that it wounded. And then as we do this as a society, as more and more of us become free of this generational energy and this generational trauma, then we all become more free. Because then we are approaching life and approaching the world in a way that is more free, allowing other people to heal and other people to become free of their own trauma and generational energy. So I just really wanted you to understand what that is and to know what it is, and maybe we'll do an entire episode at some point on generational trauma and ancestral energy and all of that. But that's briefly what it is when I'm talking about it. So here in this energy center, these feelings of low self-worth, low self-esteem, being undeserving, not having value, all of that, worthlessness, lives in this energy center. Now, this energy center is also in charge of creative energy. This is not necessarily just art or like creation in all forms, but it also includes any kind of invention, innovation, problem solving, and also sexual creative energy. Now, that could be a whole episode on its own as well, so I won't get into that a ton. But your sexual energy is one of the most powerful and creative energies that exists. And part of that is, as you think about it, like you are creating life. You are literally creating life with that energy when you make a baby. So this is incredibly potent and powerful energy that you can actually utilize in your life. That being said, this is where it comes from. This is where it lives. This is where it moves. Another aspect of this sacral chakra is abundance. Abundance of everything. A feeling of abundance, a feeling of wealth. And that's not just money and finances and material wealth, but it's also emotional richness. It's how we relate to our ability to receive and enjoy life's pleasures. And that's the other piece that sits in here is pleasure. And again, it's that sensuality of everything. It's taste, it's smell, it's sight, it's the juiciness of life. That's what lives here in this sacral chakra. Pleasure is the full range of the emotional spectrum. Pleasure is the ability to experience joy and playfulness and sexual fulfillment and everything really that this life has to offer as humans. This is a big reason why some of us are here. To experience what it's like to be in a body is one of the greatest gifts. And I know I've said this before, but there are beings in the world that wish to have a body, and we get to. And part of the reason, one of the big reasons, is this desire to experience pleasure. And sometimes pleasure comes across as like maybe a sinful thing or a bad thing that we should avoid, or we should feel bad or guilty if we've experienced too much pleasure or if we're too abundant and all of these things. And there absolutely can be an overindulgence of this pleasure center, but at the same time, most of us in our modern society are actually underindulging in pleasure. We are guilt-tripping ourselves into diets that we don't need to be doing, or we are forcing ourselves to work and never take vacation and experience life, and to be so rigid and so stressed out that we cannot experience joy or playfulness. And some of us are so caged and so bound by societal standards that require us to avoid pleasure and avoid play that we're missing out on a big aspect of life. And for many people, it's because pleasure has been described to us as wrong or sinful in some way. Even if no one has ever directly said that to you, there is a sense in our culture that we're supposed to work and never experience joy or pleasure. And that's just a control mechanism, unfortunately. Whether it came out of religion or whether it came out of government and people of power does not really matter. But what it is it is restricting our flow and it is restricting our ability to expand. The more sensual and beautiful and juicy your life is, the more you want to share it with others and the more joy that expands from you, from your energy, from your body. If you're eating food and you're not feeling bad or guilty about it, you're not worried about never getting it and then you're overindulging. I would even say a good reason that there is so much addiction is because of this feeling of lack and scarcity and things like diet culture and that type of thing, rather than just this space in between where you have balance between overindulgence and underindulgence, and you're right in the middle and you're just experiencing true, real pleasure. And food is a really easy one to talk about, and drinking is a really easy one to talk about, but that also is the same for sex, too. There is a real problem right now where so many people were suppressed sexually for many generations and for a long time that they either had to hide their sexual nature or they didn't even allow themselves to experience it. And now we have overcorrected and have in our society some really dangerous sexual situations happening because people don't want to be bound anymore by feeling sexual repression and oppression. And now they are freely giving their very powerful sexual energy to anyone and everyone. And we've gone to the other side of the coin here. And the sweet spot for everything is right in the middle. Allowing your fullest, most sensual, most beautiful expression of your sexuality, but still containing it to the point that it is reserved for that experience that is really intentional. And unfortunately, most people just don't know how to live in that in-between because it hasn't been talked about and it hasn't been taught how powerful this energy is and what to do with it. So as I said too, this is the place obviously of the birth of a child, the creation of a child, but also the creation of life, of an idea, of a work of art. This is where you birth all of those beautiful ideas and emotions and creations into the world. And it's where you desire to do that. You desire to create. You desire to put something out into the world, whether it be a human child or a creative project. And then lastly, as I mentioned with the water element, this is where the emotional fluidity lives. This is one of the energy centers that helps us to process and helps us to express emotions healthily. And if you think about sensuality, if you think about taste and sight and smell and all of these aspects of what it means to have provocative experiences, those things are very emotional. When you taste something that just is so delicious, that's an emotional experience. When you smell something that's absolutely disgusting, that's an emotional experience. So all of these components work together to help us process our emotions through and to be the most vibrant and expressive version of ourselves. Now let's discuss the physical components here because like I talked about last week, the energy centers are not just randomly chosen or placed. They are all connected with physical aspects of our body. They are all connected with nerve plexuses that innervate different organs and glands and send hormonal signals in our bodies. So our sacral region is obviously where many of the reproductive organs are, but it's also connected with the bladder, with the kidneys, and the lower back in general. And it is connected with hormones like estrogen and testosterone. So this area is also on a physical level going to regulate sexual and reproductive functions. So if you are having infertility issues or something going on there, there is a good chance that it has to do with the energy in this space. And now, like I said, that could be many different avenues, right? It could have to do with self-worth. It could have to do with generational trauma and energy that hasn't been processed, emotions that haven't been processed about anything. It could have to do with sexual trauma, whether with you or with someone in your generational line. It could have to do with miscarriages that your mother had, or her mother, or abortion that they had. All of that is energetically impacting your system. So if you are having any kind of infertility issues, there is a lot to work with here beyond just the physical level. And I highly recommend adding some of that energy work into your process as you are meeting with doctors and discussing what you can do on a physical level and a hormonal level, but also working with a practitioner that understands energy and seeing what you can do from that energetic space too. And for those of you that have lost children or gone through miscarriages or anything like that, or just infertility in general, I know it's such a emotional process of its own. And so maybe even within that, there is something to be let go of or released that you might just need some help with processing. So if you are going through that and you are experiencing that, I am so sorry, and I'm here for you as much as I can be. Please reach out if you would like help processing some of that through your body from an energetic standpoint. And then the other element here physically is this chakra is connected to water. So it's connected to the bodily fluids and the lymphatic system and the circulation in your body. Now, the lymphatic system is a whole thing on its own, but this is what moves toxins through the body. And sometimes the lymphatic system can become really stagnant, and you have to really practice moving your lymph through your body, for some people more than others. And this is why, physical exercise and that kind of thing is important. You can skin brush, you can do all these things. But as it's connected to the sacral chakra here, the more that your sacral energy is flowing, the more that your lymph and your circulation, your bodily fluids are going to be flowing a little bit better. They're going to be a little less stagnant. So if you do have any stagnancy in your lymph or just swollen lymph nodes or anything like that on a more regular basis, then looking at the sacral chakra here is going to be really valuable for you too. And then, of course, talking about the low back in this area, a lot of people have hip pain, a lot of people have low back pain, and even that pelvic floor pain or any of that's associated sometimes with birth or birth trauma. All of that has to do with this energy center as well. So a lot of times it's just emotional energy. And I don't want to say it's just emotional energy. It's also probably physical pain and inflammation and all of these different physical things. But a piece of it is probably having to do with emotional energy that's just being stored here that hasn't been released. Again, whether that's yours, someone's you've absorbed, or a generational energy here. So if your sacral chakra is underactive, here are the symptoms that you should look for. If you have no creativity, you think you're not a creative person, or you just have a lack of creative thinking. Again, this is not just art or creative projects, but this is problem solving, this is ideas, this is innovation. So if you have a lack of that in your life, maybe it's been your whole life, or maybe just recently, for some reason, you've experienced some kind of change in your energy body or in your life, and suddenly you're not feeling creative anymore, this is the place to check. And a lot of times, a lack of creativity comes with an emotional numbness, or an emotional numbness comes with a lack of creativity. So if you feel like you can't feel, if you want to cry but you can't, you're one of those people, you're probably really overburdened and overworked, and that makes your sacral energy underactive. Because think about it, if you're overburdened, if you are in stress mode, if you're in fight or flight, your root energy center is going to be turned way up. If you're running from a tiger, you're not thinking about pleasurable experiences, whatever that would be. It's not important to you as you're trying to run for your life. So if you're in a state of stress, if you're in a state of fight or flight, your body is not going to be thinking about pleasure, and it's also not going to be thinking about releasing your emotions. It's not going to be worried about that because it's worried about surviving. Many people whose sacral chakra and all of the other chakras too that are underactive, a lot of times that comes from an overactive root chakra, too much stress, too much burden in your life, okay? A fear of intimacy is another symptom of an underactive sacral chakra. Again, this is a fear of intimacy with anyone, friends, coworkers, family, just a fear of real connection. And you probably know if you're one of these people. You're afraid to go deeper than surface level. You don't know how to go deeper than surface level. You don't want to. You don't want to know about other people because if you ask them questions about them, then they might ask questions about you. A lot of times, if you are a person who talks and talks and talks and talks about yourself but never asks other people about themselves, sometimes this is a real fear of intimacy. You are just spouting off all of these things about yourself that you feel safe to share, but you're not actually interested in connecting with other human beings. And the reason you're not interested in connecting is because you have this fear of intimacy and this fear of real, true connection because of your self-worth, because of your sense of value about yourself. And sometimes even if you're spouting off all of these things about yourself, that's in an effort to convince yourself that you are worthy. So that's something to think about if you find yourself in those situations a lot where you are the person just talking on and on about yourself and you can't seem to shut up. Take a step back, take a breath, and just notice if you're actually connecting with the people around you or if you're giving them space to connect with you. Another symptom of an underactive sacral chakra is low libido. Low libido, low sexual drive, and sometimes this is unexplainable, and sometimes it is because of some kind of sexual repression or trauma in your life. And usually if it's unexplainable, it has to do with some kind of emotional numbness or some kind of trauma that you either don't remember or is in your generational line, but you have not dealt with it or no one has dealt with it. And then along with that is that difficulty in experiencing pleasure. So maybe you are having sex on a regular basis, but you are not able to find it pleasurable, or it's just not enjoyable to you in the way that you know it could be or it should be. And of course, not just with sex. You might have difficulty in just experiencing overall pleasure in your life. And just a lack of passion, a lack of enthusiasm, a lack of excitement and vitality in your life or about the things in life, the experiences that you're having, just inability to be fully immersed in all of these sort of more physical experiences. And then feelings of guilt or shame are also very common in this place. And we'll talk more in detail about that in a minute. Now, if your sacral chakra is overactive, and like I said, sometimes this is people who have overcorrected. Maybe they did feel really oppressed in certain areas of their life, whether that's creatively, intimately, sexually, whatever it was, and they have now overcorrected and they have an overactive sacral chakra. So this is people who are way too emotionally volatile. These are people who cannot control their emotions. Now, I am all for releasing your emotions. You got to get those things out and you've got to move those through your body. But some people are addicted to specific emotional responses, or they are overly emotional about everything when it's not an emotional situation or a situation where they would naturally be processing emotions through. Then, like I said, addiction to pleasure or sensory experiences. So this could be addiction to food, addiction to alcohol, addiction to shopping, like how that makes you feel, like really a lot of different addictions here, a sex addiction, any of that stuff, anything that's overly pleasurable that is an addiction comes in this space. And a lot of people who have suffered from sexual exploitation or abuse or trauma may find themselves being addicted to different pleasurable experiences and sensory experiences and just overindulgent experiences. They also might have an overwhelming focus on sexual gratification or also emotional gratification. And then lastly, there is a little bit of corruption within intimate relationships to the point that they are codependent. So if you feel like you absolutely cannot live without someone in your life, that is a codependency. It is relying on that person for survival and for many different aspects of your livelihood. This is a huge symptom of an overactive sacral chakra. And like I said, typically an overactive sacral chakra is just an overcorrection of some pain and some hurt and some trauma, almost all of the time. So these people are going to have mood swings, obsessive relationships, probably no boundaries within their relationships. And these are the people that are more overdramatic or even manipulative, like emotionally manipulative, and also manipulative within relationships as well. All right, so a balanced sacral chakra now will be someone who is emotionally stable, who's processing their emotions, but is able to come back to homeostasis after they've processed it through. They have a creative outlook on life. They have a balanced sexuality, which again, essentially just means you're utilizing that sexual energy with intention, the way that you want to use it, in a way that is healthy to your body and to your energy, and also taking into consideration your partner's energy and that connection there. And you have an openness to intimacy. You have an openness to connecting on a deep level with multiple people, whether that be your friends or family or a romantic relationship. You will also have a strong sense of self-worth. Really, that is the underlying factor in all of this anyway, is that self-worth piece and the weight of your self-worth and the belief of your self-worth. And by having that, you here have the ability to enjoy life's pleasures. You don't feel excess pain or guilt. Now, I'm not saying you never feel guilt or shame, because that would actually be disturbing. But you are feeling confident in your creative abilities. You're feeling you have healthy emotional expression. You have a sense of pleasure, joy, fulfillment in your life. And that pleasure is balanced. It's not overly indulgent and it's not completely cut off. Now, let's discuss the balance between pain and pleasure here for a moment. Most people think of pain as a negative thing and a bad experience that you try to avoid. And the reality of life, especially this life, this three-dimensional reality in which we exist, is that it is a reality of a dualistic nature, which means we will experience pain, but we will also experience pleasure. We'll experience the opposite. We'll experience both, all ends of the spectrum. And we cannot escape pain. And many people strive their entire lives to escape pain and by doing so experience more pain. So the sooner you can accept that pain is part of the relationship to this life, the happier and the more joyful and the more pleasurable your life will be able to be, even in the midst of having painful moments and experiences. Pain is actually not the worst thing. The worst thing is numbness. Pain provides us with experience. It provides us with wisdom. It provides us with opportunities for growth and connection. And it empowers us and makes us strong. And without pain, you would not know pleasure, true pleasure, at least in this life, in the way that we experience it here. And I think part of that is why we're in these bodies, to experience all of it and to learn from it and to grow from it in a way that we wouldn't be able to otherwise. And when you think about creativity and the things that are birthed out of pain, usually it is more beautiful because the viewer is able to relate to that pain that the artist experienced and also see the pleasure or see the hope. Not only is art like a beautiful way to process your pain, but it also is a tool for intimacy with other people. So as you're experiencing pain, you are living a creative process, a creative story that at some point will help other people and will motivate and inspire other people, as difficult and as painful as it may be. And I think when we talk about pain and pleasure, it's also needed to talk about all ends of the emotional spectrum, because we tend to idolize peace and joy and love and abundance and all of these quote unquote higher vibrational emotions. And we get mad at fear and guilt and shame. And if someone didn't experience guilt and shame, I mean, they would be a robot or like scary. You experience guilt and shame and fear because it lets you know where your boundary is. And it lets you know how to correct in the future. It lets you know where your moral code is, where your moral compass is. If you didn't have guilt or shame in some way coming up in your body, you would have no morality. And that's a whole level of scary, I think. So with anything that we're talking about in healing, I will always come back to it's all about that balance. It's about recognizing that guilt and shame in your life, when it's coming up, why it's coming up, how often it comes up. Is it coming up because it's hitting a wall of your personal boundary, or is it coming up because of something that was instilled in you that's not true? And that is the indicator. That's the difference that we need to figure out here when it comes up. And the same thing with fear. Is it coming up to protect you? Is it coming up to tell you some information about how to move forward? Or is it coming up because you have low self-worth and you don't believe in yourself? There's a big difference. So over and over, I will say healing is just getting to know yourself on such a deep level and learning to balance these things as they are true to you and what you need and what you as a human being need. And when the shame and guilt come up here in the sacral chakra too, a lot of times they come up with what we call the inner critic. And that is that low self-worth piece inside of you that is protecting you, right? It's protecting you from feeling inadequate. So by criticizing yourself, you won't be criticized by others. By hurting yourself, it's safer to you and your subconscious than being criticized and hurt by others. So a lot of times this inner critic will prevent you from being authentic, will prevent you from fully expressing yourself, from fully unleashing your creativity, unleashing your sexuality and your intimacy, because it is so afraid of being rejected. And again, it goes back to that self-worth piece. So also recognizing when your judgment comes out and when your inner critic comes out, not only for you, but for other people, when you're judging other people, typically it is because you have this sense of low self-worth hiding somewhere deep in this sacral energy center, and it is masquerading as a critic of yourself and other people. And then also here in the sacral area, a lot of times we find frustration and disappointment. And specifically, this is frustration and disappointment with unmet needs or unfulfilled expectations or desires. And again, a lot of times it comes back to that self-worth piece because we either feel that we haven't gotten those things that we want because we're unworthy of them, or we actually haven't gotten the things that we want because we feel we're unworthy of them. Does that make sense? So if you are putting out that signal that you are not worthy of the things that you want, then you won't get the things that you want because you believe that you're not worthy of them. Or you just haven't gotten the things that you want yet because it's not the time, or you've got to heal in some other ways first. And so then you start to believe that you are unworthy. And it's kind of a cycle. So a lot of times that frustration and that disappointment lives here too. And that can also be generational. That can just be something that happens in your family, and then you saw that your mom and your dad didn't believe that they were worthy, and so they didn't have abundance or they didn't have loving relationships, and so now you believe that that's true about you because you saw it, you've experienced it, and it's in your energy. So now let's talk about this specifically for artists and creatives. Because especially with the sacral chakra, I mean, so many artists and creatives have imbalances here because many of you have had difficult emotional experiences, difficult sexual experiences, or intimate experiences. And sometimes that informs your art and sometimes that blocks your art. So let's just talk about all of that a little bit here. So first of all, we are talking about that self-worth piece. If you have a creative block, if you have a difficulty accessing your inspiration, sometimes it is coming from that lack of self-worth. Maybe you don't trust yourself enough to tap in and to let it out, to express it. Or you have expressed it and it didn't go so well in some way, and so that's caused a lack of confidence in your artistic abilities in some way, and now you're in this looping cycle of feeling blocked because you don't feel good enough. And this is what people are talking about when they're talking about that comparison piece. Your inner critic is coming out to criticize you and to compare you to other people in your field or other artists that you look up to, any of that. So that is an important piece here. And then there is the piece of burnout. There is the piece of emotional exhaustion. And some of you are living in emotional exhaustion and you are living in emotional turmoil because you think that it's good for your art. Pain does help to create beautiful art. That is a true thing in this world. But re-experiencing your pain for the sake of your art is like cutting open a wound and picking a scab over and over and over that will never heal, when ultimately, if you let it heal, if you utilize your art to process the pain and then you let it heal through the art and can move past it to the next creative project, if you can experience both ends of the spectrum, the pain and the pleasure, and allow yourself some of the pleasure in a way that's healthy, in a way that is healing, in a way that's beautiful and expansive to you, then that's exactly what your life is going to be artistically too. Your artistic life has the ability to expand. Your artistic life has the ability to grow and to multiply. But if you keep yourself in this one area of pain over and over and over, and you're just recycling the same pain, that is no life to live. Some of you are so focused on that sensory pleasure to distract you from the pain rather than to process the pain through and then experience real and true pleasure. All of the artists I know, all of the creatives I know are some of the most emotional and sensitive people on this earth, which is your biggest gift to the world. And I know that sometimes you feel like that's a curse, but it really is your biggest gift to be able to feel the way that a lot of the world cannot feel. So by feeling and by expressing it and by sharing it, You're helping those that cannot understand how to experience pleasure and how to experience that sensitivity that you do. But what happens is a lot of times you get stuck, trapped in the pain part of it, and you never allow yourself to experience that joy and that abundance and that beauty because you are addicted to that overindulgence in the pain of it. So that's something to notice within yourself and notice how it's affecting your life, notice how it's affecting your art, your creativity, and notice how it is affecting your relationships, both romantically and platonically. All right, so let's talk about how to heal this area, how to work with this energy to make it balanced and in alignment. So doing any practices, creative practices that are expressive will help this area. For some of you, that's quite a stretch and, maybe not the first thing you would go to. For those of you that feel like you can paint, dance, draw, sing, like anything that feels creative to you, go ahead and do that. Anytime you are feeling any of those symptoms I mentioned, working through them and releasing them through your creative expression will help to unblock any of that stagnancy. For those of you that have trouble with that idea or don't feel super creative or just are kind of stuck and blocked in that area and you're a little afraid or you're not ready to jump fully into that artistic lifestyle and do that, you can connect with water. That can be swimming, that can be just spending time near bodies of water, that can be taking baths. Being in water helps to process emotions. That's why sometimes after a long day, it is really good to just take a nice salt bath and allow yourself to just sit in there with some music, no podcasts, no books or anything. Just kind of sit in there and really kind of process through your emotions. That water element will really help you to process those things. And drinking water, of course, as well helps to process things through. You can also do any kind of activity that really opens up the hips or the lower back. So you could do yoga and that kind of thing, some stretching to help move those areas. And if you get regular massage or you have an energy or body worker that knows what they're doing with the hip area, this can be a really potent emotional release for you. If you have someone that knows what they're doing, you can request this a lot of places and just say, hey, I really want some work in this area, because not a lot of massage therapists will do work in that area because it is so intense for the client. But if you have a massage therapist that you know, that you trust, or an energy body worker that knows what they're doing, and you can ask for work in the hips, this will really, really help to start to unblock some of that and release some huge emotions, generational emotions, and that kind of thing. You can also do some breath work that really focuses on especially this lower abdominal region and stimulates this area. And then, as I said, this energy center is associated with the color orange. So eating foods that are that color are always beneficial. So carrots, sweet potatoes, oranges are all going to help balance that area. And then, of course, I will always say meditation and energy healing. So if you want some specific help in this area, then I'm your girl. I am happy to help you out with some energy healing for yourself. So here are just some questions to reflect on, to ask yourself as we close here today, to see if this space in your body is free, if it is aligned, or if it is blocked and stagnant and misaligned. One thing you can ask is, do I feel creatively fulfilled? Do I feel like I can express myself fully? Am I allowing myself to experience pleasure and joy in life? Or do I feel guilty about indulging in certain experiences? And what are those experiences? And you might even ask, why do I feel guilty? Is that something that's coming from me? Is it coming from somewhere else? Did someone tell me I should feel guilty or shameful? And then you can ask how you feel about intimate connections with others. Are there people in your life that you are truly intimately connected with on a deep level, or is that not so much part of your life? And then, do you believe you are worthy of love and abundance and pleasure? And if not, what stories are you telling yourself about any of those topics? So check in with yourself, tap into yourself, because again, we want to get these lower chakras nice and balanced so that we can build upon it for the next week and the next week. And eventually you've got your whole system online and functioning exactly how it's supposed to be, so that you can heal, so that you can expand, so that you can ultimately thrive. As I mentioned, if you'd like to do a one-on-one session with me, please schedule a free consultation. I am here for you, and we can chat about how I can help you. If that is not your thing, check out my membership. It's $7.77 a month, and you get healing tools every single week that are exclusive to you and will help you on your healing journey. Last week, I released a root balancing meditation, and this week I will definitely be releasing some sacral balancing content. So if that sounds interesting or helpful to you, then get in the membership. And next week, we are going to be talking about the solar plexus energy center, which is all about feeling empowered in your life. Can't wait to talk to you soon. Bye-bye.